This week, we're trying to build up the tools to be able to make coding blocks, write software essentially, to be able to create secret messages using the Caesar cipher and to be able to decode those secret messages. Yesterday, as we built up the tools to achieve this goal, I introduced some coding blocks. On start, which just means make your microbit do whatever you want it to do when you hit play over here. Execute the other blocks, in other words, run them. For loops, which basically means that we're going to automate our process. We're going to do something for a range of numbers. We're going to go from 0 to 3 in this instance. So what we did initially yesterday was just showed the numbers. So we showed 0, 1, 2, 3 as we looped through this for loop. If-then logic statements and comparisons, the block inside the if and then, which basically say I want special behavior. If I hit a certain index, engage in some behavior that might be different to when I hit the other indexes. And then displaying things as I mentioned earlier. Notice the subtle difference between showing a number, the index is a number, and showing a string, a series of letters or characters or words or a phrase. The block inside the if-len here, the comparison, includes my sneaky sort of little text block, which, by the way, if you didn't find it immediately yesterday, is in this brown text drawer under Advanced. This text block does something rather special. It translates the characters in a word or a string, and it changes them into their corresponding number. So here the H corresponds to 0, the I to 1, the exclamation mark to 2. Let's think about what this code does when we run the whole thing. Well, it's going to loop through index from 0 to 3, which hopefully you're very familiar with from yesterday. It's going to ask the question, what character corresponds to this index? So for 0, it would be H. For 1, it would be I. For 2, it would be the exclamation mark, which is why we say character rather than letter, by the way, because of course exclamation mark is not a letter, it's a character. It's some text. And so 0H, 1I, 2 exclamation mark, and then it's going to say, okay, well, as I'm looping through my indexes, which of these is H? And if we're at the index that corresponds to H, do something special. Show the number, the index, and show the string. Show the character. Well, in this case, we're going to show a capital H, which is a hint for some of the questions I'm going to ask later. So let's see if that actually happens. Loop through on index 0. We hit the logic statement, it's true, and we show the index and the capital H. So we show 0 and capital H. Now, of course, you don't just need one if, else, then logic statement. You can add many. You can add an else, which means for everything else, do something. So, for instance, with a single else, what we'd be saying is when the character is equal to H, let's display capital H. But in every other instance, when this is not the case, when this logic's not the case, just show the number of the index. So when it's 0, you see the H, the capital H, but 1, 2, 3 just shows the number. But we can also add different if-then clauses. So let's borrow the piece of code from the comparison in the initial if statement and change it to, say, an exclamation mark. So when the character from this little string corresponds to exclamation mark, what should we do? Let's show the number again, and let's also show a string. And in this case, let's show the character exclamation mark itself. We don't need the else. You might need that later on. Let's play this now, and you'll see at index 0, capital H, at index 2, exclamation mark. Notice I didn't ask this code to do anything at index 1, which would correspond to the letter I. And I didn't ask it to do anything at index 3, which here is essentially meaningless because it's longer than the string of interest. 0 is H, 1 is I, 2 is exclamation mark. 3 doesn't really mean anything, so we didn't do anything at that index either. I want to pull one more trick to simplify this code. Imagine we had a super long message like this. And every time I use this message, I went, oh, I've got to cut and paste this everywhere. Oops, sorry. I've got to cut and paste this everywhere. And remember that you could have many if-then statements. We just have 2 here, but there could be a lot. And so maybe instead of whatever this long message string is, it's better to create a new variable, which I've called message. Over here in variables, you can create a new one with a new name. And then I can set message to what we care about, hi. And then each of these individual uses of hi, what was previously hi but is now message, I can just substitute the variable message in. And now I don't need to think about it. Now that just means the word hi, potentially with an exclamation mark, or in my gobbledygook before, whatever it is. And we can therefore just set it, forget about it, move on. So that's one innovation. Notice, by the way, that down here I'm showing the index and I'm showing the exclamation mark, but I can ask it to do anything. So here I can say, well, when you get to this block, do something crazy and ridiculous. So 0, capital H, 2, I get this weird gobbledygook because that's what I asked it to display. So that's the information that you need to try the questions I want you to attempt for this session, building off this example. And the questions I want you to attempt are to write some code to take the phrase "the quick brown fox" and capitalize the first letters. So capitalize T, Q, B, and F to show the quick brown fox with capital letters at the beginning. Make sure, though, that your microbit still shows the HE, the UICK, the ROWN. It just capitalizes the first letters. Helpfully, now I've set the message to something, you can just set the message up here to the quick brown fox and manipulate it in this logic. Second, and I think of this as building up a sort of a coding cipher, building up things where you substitute one letter for another letter. So let's substitute the Q with a T, the U with an H, and the X with a G in the phrase "the quick brown fox" and display what you get to screen. Finally, once you've done that, if you achieve all of that in the next 30 minutes or so, let's also, instead of substituting Q with T, U with H, X with G, take the phrase that results from those substitutions and try and reverse the process. So the phrase you get from the second question, try to write code to turn it back into the quick brown fox. And tell me why that process is particularly easy or difficult. Finally, somewhat leadingly, I've left this hatched out code block, length of message. This may be useful when you write your code. If you don't understand what it means, you might think already that you do, but try, for instance, dropping it into a show number clause and just show length of message. And that's one way to understand what these various new clever little pieces of logic I'm showing you do. But see if you can use this length of message somewhere usefully in your code. So here are the questions and the stretch goal again, and I'll come back in about 30 to 35 minutes to walk you through some solutions to these problems.